Welcome to the Business of Blessing, where we'll be discussing the highs and lows of building business, mental health, and growing in relationship with God. Hosted by Matt and Sarah Jane Ethan, we invite you to join our journey into greater practical, emotional, and spiritual freedom. For more support and free resources, head to www.businessofblessing.com, and don't forget to subscribe to our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes so you don't miss a single episode. Well, today we've got something a little bit different because I am joined by my husband, Matt. Matt has had the most incredible experience with God in the last year, where really your life has totally changed. The way that you see God, the way you see yourself, the way you operate in the world has totally changed. Right. So, you know, it's very much in line with my own story. It was funny because in a lot of ways we were being challenged on different things, but the end point was the same for both of us. So we were able to talk about our stories with each other. And although we were learning different things, our end point the conclusions we were getting to was, it's this and it's this. So,
it's quite funny, wasn't it? There's so many different stories. I can't remember any of them now because my memory does not remember details at all. But I just remember thinking that it's because we approach and understand the world so differently, opposite directions. But actually, the opposite directions are being fixed. I don't want to use that word, but fixed to get us to the sort of middle point that actually was really useful.
Yeah, it's so because we are polar opposites in the way we think about everything, which I think is what makes us a good team. But I think it meant actually it was helpful because we were bringing different dynamics into this revelation, this new revelation of who God was and how any of this works, how life works. And so, you know, my personality and the things that I was connecting with and the things that God was saying was actually complementing and sparring off of the experiences you were having and the revelations you were having. So we've kind of just made each other...
But vice versa, because the whole purpose of this part of my story is knowing people like you... Mm-hmm. emotionally connect with God and have words, you know, that they feel in their spirit, you know, they see a picture and like I kind of had those things, but equally I'm an intellectual person, right? Like, you know, I've got postgraduate degrees in molecular biology. Like that's where my brain works and is most comfortable with. You analyze something, you get numbers to put to that analysis, and therefore that is a fact. That thing does that, and that's it. But when you come to like an emotional world, you know, you often joked with me, is that because I used to say, I just really struggle, you know, when I was calm. I really struggle because I feel like I'm not an emotional person. You're like, well, you are emotional. You're just angry. Basically, the only emotion.
I said you just have all the negative ones.
Right,
like you're angry and frustrated and annoyed and like hopeless and pointless and like.
And I totally was, and like I was aware of that even from being a teenager. And actually sort of developing through that recently. And I think that was a good journey. I was trying to not be that angry, aggressive, unpleasant person a lot of the time. And that was in my own power. But actually this part of the story has actually revealed where I've been able to let go. And now, you know, I am a happier person generally. Yeah. I'm calmer. I don't need to be right.
Wow.
Or try not to need to be right. Sorry to anyone if that happens to you. I'm trying. You know, it's all those sorts of things, and that actually that emotional journey. So, you know, knowing and witnessing you being able to connect to the Almighty in that way is really inspirational to me and helps me see something else that I'm missing.
Like a potential.
Because, you know, and the point of this sort of part of the journey really is, of the story about me, is this concept of going from this intellectual... sort of not knowing God, or that's how you engage with it. God speaks to me through my intellect. You know, I only relate to God through my intellect. Like, I know the Bible says this, this, and this, and it's a religious. Oftentimes, it's a religious construct. Some of those ideas, you know.
So you can get to the point where you're like, I know it now. I understand it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You know, and that's when I think people can dig their heels in.
Yes.
And they struggle to engage with good questions that maybe start to deconstruct their understanding of their faith and who God is, and because we think that that's what makes us secure, is that, well, I understand the concepts and now I can repeat them, and so that's it. Do you know, I'm a good Christian. Do you know, whatever. And
I often think of my best bud Tim knows more about this because he's an engineer, but it's like pre-stressed concrete. If you break a little bit of it, because it's pre-stressed and it's like in this, and that's perfect for its purpose, but if you break like a little bit of it, the whole thing just like it almost explodes, from what I understand. And a lot of people's Christian theology and doctrine is like that, and it's why denominations get angry at each other. I think we've got a friend here. If you're watching on video, we've got a little furry friend.
Joe, you just can't not be the centre of attention, can you? He has to be the star of the show. And when you follow the Instagram and the Facebook, you'll quickly get to know that Jeremy is actually the star of this show.
Yeah. So I think, it's. I think that's where that coming from that side of things is having these sort of concepts, and I'm really grateful because a lot of influential people in my life, right from being a kid really, have taught me this concept of being liberal with my ideologies, like my ideas, the things that I hold to. I.e., the concept is, if you've got an idea of how the world works and then you find evidence in the real world, it's science really, but if you find evidence in the real world that contradicts that idea, then the idea is wrong. Like you're wrong, not nature, right?
Yeah, I've often said this, that I think people's ability to discern truth is basically, does it fit with what I've been previously told?
Yes.
If it is, then it's true. If it's not, then it's false.
Which is the basis, essentially, of brainwashing is not the right word, but it's why a lot of our, maybe sort of vocal atheist cousins, as if it were, sort of look at organised religion and just say it's a big cult. Like it's just a way to control your mind, because if we're constantly looking at the real world and reality and saying, oh no, it has to conform, right? I'm going to bend over backwards, and this is where we get this pre-stressed concrete idea. I'm going to bend over backwards to try and make this concept now fit into my worldview. And the good example,
mental gymnastics.
Right? It's like them. It's like the Catholic Church in the medieval era. Imprisoning Galileo and Copernicus for saying, oh, I don't think the world is the centre of the solar system.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure the Earth goes around the sun. So they say, nope, can't be true. And deny it. Yeah. And then eventually it got accepted, obviously.
So the thing is that we're saying, okay, so if being able to understand what truth is not just comparing it to what you've been told in the past, how do you know what's true? Who's God? Do you know how to read the Bible? Any of this stuff? And I think the experience that we have both gone through in this last year and a half is actually encountering God powerfully and tangibly, not just as an intellectual concept, but as a very practical, describable, discernible experience. And so that's really where I think your story took a turning point, that I, as Matt said, he used to say, oh, I'm an intellectual, God doesn't speak to me through my emotions, because I'm not an emotional person. He speaks to me through my mind. And then one day you came down like with this dumbstruck look on your face, like your eyes wide open and your mouth open, and he just stood in the doorway and just like stared at me. And I immediately laughed because he looked so funny. And I said, Matt, you look like a crazy man who's having like mystical encounters in his office. And you went, no, like I've literally just had an encounter. And I was like, oh, like tell me more. Because that was really, I suppose, like you had heard God speaking to you, but I suppose that was the first time that you actually experienced, I suppose, what could be described as the presence of God, the awareness of God's present with you. What did that even look like, because that was really the turning point for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think first, I was worried that what we'd just been talking about was like a tangent, but actually it wasn't a tangent, because the reality of me going through this path and realising all these intellectual ideas about God they feel like they're blocking me from actually getting to God. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of who Jesus is just doesn't conform to what I'm seeing with my ideas of my theology and my Bible understanding and all this. It all just feels like a huge web that's getting in the way of the real person of God himself. So I think connecting with him on a real level was something that I was desiring. You were listening in the garden to a worship song that was probably the one worship song over the years from when I was a younger man that I actually really connected with. There was something.
Makes you sound like you're an old man. When I was a younger man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am kind of old.
Don't. I thought I was 36 and actually I'm turning 38 this week, and I was like, oh, I feel like I've just lost a year of my life. What is happening?
I definitely did that in my late 20s as well.
There'll be people here listening like 30. Oh, what I would give to be 38 again.
Yeah.
So I was listening to the song in the garden, the worship song from your
and it was, again, I was going through this process of I don't want some experience of God that I can just explain away with coincidence or just simple psychology. If he's real, I want something real.
Yes.
And this was the start of it, was coming down, hearing you listening to that song, which I hadn't heard in years. And it was only one sort of, in terms of a spiritual experience that I'd really had. It was one that I'd listened to a few times because I just really felt like, I can actually experience God with this song. Anyway, in the middle of that song, so that was cool in the first place, that you just randomly found this random song that, like, it's not like it's famous or anything. It's like super under the radar, and it's the exact version as well. Like the artist has a proper recording of that song. But this is the live one from that very specific live. Yeah. Anyway,
it gets even more coincidental than that. That was actually the song that God told me to pray for you over.
That's right.
So I felt God tell me to pray for you. It was funny because I actually I started praying for other things, and then as you started going on this journey with God, I realised I was praying for the wrong thing, because I'm praying for superficial things. That in our world might be seen as success, or happiness or whatever, and realising that the thing you needed the most, and I think the thing that any of us need, is God. It was a bit like yesterday. Jeremy was whining at me because he wanted some grass from outside, because he's an indoor cat. He needs to eat some grass so he doesn't get constipated, which is that's a whole other story in itself, how to deal with a constipated cat.
You went there.
I did get there. And so he was whinging, but he'd already had his grass. He had all his biscuits. He literally had everything his little kitty heart could desire, and he was still whinging at me and whining. And I sometimes when he gets like that, I know that he actually just needs contact. He needs rest. He needs connection with me, and he needs a cuddle. And so I picked him up, and he immediately just calmed into my arms, and he fell asleep, and he stayed there for ages. And I said to him, I was going, oh, Jeremy, you thought you wanted grass, but you actually just wanted me. And I immediately felt God say, can you hear yourself? That so often, it's people, we think, oh, I want this grass, because that's gonna fill me up, but actually all we actually want is God. And so as I was praying for you to have these, I suppose, grass, it's the things that we think are going to sustain us, the things that we think will make us happy. But actually realising the thing you actually needed all along was God, was this encounter with God. So anyway, I was praying the wrong thing, but God graciously, with his artistic license, goes, I love that heart. I'm going to just adapt that prayer into what it actually, what Matt actually needs. And so I would play that song every day, and as it was playing, I would concentrate my thoughts onto you, and I would just will the best for you. I would will God for you. I would will just freedom for you. And so I had no idea that song meant anything to you. Turns out that was a deeply significant song for you, and actually was the turning point for you, hearing that song playing every day in our house.
Well, so and I look back on that, and I feel like that was almost God just giving a nod. Like I can do coincidence as well if you want. It's like it's not the important thing, and I think that's the thing. A lot of the sort of miraculous stuff that we sort of clutch onto because we're desperate for a miracle. We're sort of like, it's actually nearer coincidence than it is. But that's a totally different story, and that was part of my that was part of my process that I needed to deal with. Anyway, so in the middle of that Psalm 97, and he's talking about God's sitting on a throne, clothed in thick darkness, lightning shoots out before him. The mountains melt like wax, and all of these things. And I'm like, okay, actually, I think that was almost a revelation. It's like, okay, is that the God? If we look around the earth right now, is that the God that you see? Like, honestly. Is it not you or just me? And really asking that question of everyone, because is he? Because it isn't the one I see, and it's certainly not the one I represent in my intellectual sort of faith that I use to try and win people over to my side. Essentially, all of a sudden I feel like he's like, you need to find that person. That's the person I'm looking for.
Because it was interesting, from the outside looking in, you looked like you were losing your faith. And
Yeah.
I was praying for you, and I just felt like, oh God, it's getting worse. But actually, in reality, you were getting discontent with an idea of God, which I think actually a lot of Christians are content with an idea of God. They've got their theology and they've learnt it, memorized it, and are now, regurgitating it to other people without it actually being like we talk about, it's relationship, because that's something we've been trained to say. Christianity isn't
it's all about relationship.
So we've been trained to say it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And so we regurgitate that to people. Is it, though? Like, do you actually know who God is on a tangible and discernible level? And I think that was the bit that you were getting to. You were just like, I'm not really content with this anymore. Just learning, learning the words and then saying them. If there is a God of power, I want to meet with him.
Yeah, I actually want to meet him, or her. Controversial.
Or both.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, that's a totally separate story. But
that's another podcast episode.
Yeah, that's another podcast episode. Just the simple things that we say that don't actually make any sense. They're not real, even in terms of what the Bible says. There's just tons of stuff, and we dress up our religion, and I think that's where I identify with REM. Do you know what I mean? Like literally losing my religion to get to the place of relationship.
Feel like you're going to burst into song.
I'm definitely not going to burst into song. That would be disastrous for everybody. And I think that's where I'm sort of at. So I'm now in this position, and I think it was after that I'm pretty sure it was after that I came down and I said, I feel like I've
because before that, so in between this, so I'm listening to this song and you're starting to hear this song and it's stirring a longing in you, which looks like you're losing your faith, but actually you're becoming, I believe it's a discontent, it's an unsettled where you're just like, this isn't enough for me anymore. I need more. So in between that and you having this encounter in your office, was a conversation we had in the kitchen where you were like, I just don't know if I believe this anymore. But because you were just this like if there is this God of power who, the mountains melt like wax before him and, fire and lightning goes out, like, where is he? Yeah. Like, what? Why don't any of us see him? Like, what? And so you were like, I'm almost ready to just like, I'm just done. And so I think I remember saying to you, could you walk away without any doubt in your mind, like, God does not exist, I am walking away from this? And you were like, no, I can't, I still have a doubt. And so I said to you, well, then you owe it to yourself to find him if he can be found. So throw yourself in for 6 months, seek him with everything you've got. I said, as much as you pursued me when we were dating, wanting to get to know me, wanting to have a relationship, pursue God with that level of desire and intensity. And then if at the end of 6 months there's still nothing, well, then at least you can walk away knowing that if he could be found, I would have found him. Yeah. So you absolutely have no more doubt in your mind. You know that this is just an intellectual concept. He does not exist.
Yeah. My mum always was like, just try something for 6 months, a set period. And I was like, yeah, definitely. I think that's where it's at. I think this is where my intellectuality, that's definitely not a word. That's where my intellectuality just failed because I just made up words. But it is where it helped me, that intellectual side, because I was like, okay, none of this intellectual construct seems true to me. There's just so much of it that's just fails at every hurdle presented to it. It fails constantly. We talk about God through our opinions and our ideas because it fits a problem that we found, and then it actually creates 10 more problems that we can't explain. But for me in that scenario, I was like, okay, now I do want to push because there's a really wonderful medieval Islamic philosopher, Kalam, who has this cosmological principle, I think he calls it.
That's a good word.
Christian apologists use his thing, so just because I'm saying the word Muslim, don't get your knickers in a twist if you're a weirdo Christian. It's like, it's just this principle of, essentially, of it's this irreducible point where it's like, but why are we here? Like, how are we here? Like, I know science shows that, there's a potential for these recurring existences and universes and all of this sort of concept. but why did it start? And of course, to the scientific mind, like, the idea of God is just a trump card, because it's like, oh yeah, he's always existed. It's like, so to the scientist, it's like, well, yeah, the universe, then you could just say the same about the universe. The universe has always existed. So I realise there's conversations about that, but for me, there's just a sticking point where I'm like, matter just doesn't make sense without something else that's difficult to comprehend. It makes more sense to me in my intellectual mind, and that's literally the thread that I was hanging on at that point.
Why
so
you couldn't walk away and just go, right, he does not exist.
If that's true, and I'm fine if it's not, if after 6 months or a year I just really feel like, yeah, actually this got nowhere, yeah, maybe I would have walked away, I don't know. But the whole purpose was that if he exists, if he's real, he can reveal himself to me. It's difficult to say. I often say these things, and if you have any conversations with me about relationship with the Almighty, I often fall back on some of these concepts of, it's kind of on him to do the work, right? Because we're kind of a bit dumb in many, look at the world.
There's a reason why Jesus calls us sheep.
Right, yeah, I love that. I remember you coming up with that. You were like, why does Jesus call us sheep?
Does it have to be a sheep? Can it not be
and
like
then we
horse?
watched, we watched those sheep, didn't we, in the countryside, and we're like, it's because we're dumb. That's why he calls us sheep. Look at the world right now, of course.
They are cute.
Yeah, they're lovely. And I think that's how God sees us. They are. They're stupid, but they are cute.
I love them. They need a bit of help.
Yeah, jokes aside, of course, it is, I'm just being a bit silly. But equally, there is an element of connecting with God through him. And actually, like, the mystic message of essentially Judaism and Christianity as a combined ideal and ideology is essentially that God is the progenitor. He's the one that creates our faith, not us. Like, you ask a Jew if they're saved, and they're like, yeah, like, I was born saved. What's your problem? Wow. And God did that. Yes. And you ask any Christian, whether, regardless of their theological slant, are you saved? And they're like, yeah, God saved me. He did it, not me. So we have that inherent in our understanding of the universe of creation. And I think that's where I come from. I'm like, and that's what got me to that place where I was literally laying on, I think, the office floor, you said, or wherever I was.
Yeah, you were on your office floor.
And I was just like, no, it's him. He's got to do it. It's his thing. And you'd actually had, you felt it was a prophetic word, and I was like, hadn't really like massively connected with it at the time.
Because it was years before I'd given you that word about being in the river. I just said, I feel like I see you standing in a river with all of this strong, current flowing past you, and you're so stressed trying to keep upright. And I just see you
fighting against the stream.
Yeah, see you taking your feet off the floor and allowing yourself to float on the water, and you suddenly getting you're going to get
out of
pulled
control
along with this fast current. You're just going to go with it as you're resting on the top of the water. And for years you were like, I can't see what that means to me. But
I could see it superficially because, like, in the sense that, like, my whole life revolves around me being in control. If you know me,
he hates going like on roller coasters or anything like anything. It's like
I have to. I mean, it's not even just that superficial. I'm talking about like literally every part of my life. I have to be in control, and it was an incredibly stressful way of living. But it was the way I sort of perceived the world. I don't want to say taught, because it's not like my parents' fault or anything like that. It's just that's how I perceived the world. I needed to be in control. I needed to win. Essentially, the whole idea was. We'll go into that another time, but like there's this concept of like I need to, because that's the right thing. That's the right way to live. You need to be in control. You need to understand. You need to. Yes. It's stressful. So to this have this concept, but that superficial roller coaster example is a good reason, explanation of I can't handle the idea of being in control, and I won't enjoy it if I'm not. Yeah. So to sort of lay there and just be like, it was just a process of just feeling like I've got to let go.
Wow.
I want to let go of my control, my understanding, my the previous sort of understandings that I've had, and just know him. And I think that's what sparked that experience, really, and to sort of really connect with God. Sorry, just got a little vocal kitty.
Got a little kitty who wants to come and be a part of the show. Now you just rest there, Jeremy. If you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, you can get to YouTube and have a look at little Jeremy who's just joined us here in our makeshift recording studio.
So I think going through that process of letting go of my control, my understanding, I think that was the problem. It wasn't my understanding. It was the understanding that I felt I had to bend to and live by. And I think that whether I've got a lot of Muslim friends, so if one of our friends listens to this as well, I think all religion, Christianity,
yes,
Islam, everything we create these bizarre and very difficult to live by rules and set of circumstances because essentially
it makes us feel in control.
It makes us feel in control, right? And I think that's it's not like God's not like upset at us or anything because we made all these rules or anything. He's wanting us to go to a different level and understand him and know him, and I think that was the thing. So combining that with my sort of starting to sort of connect with my emotional side and know that I'm actually a person that feels things.
Which is interesting. That came after encountering God. It's almost like I thoroughly believe that as you encounter God, or as you get to know God, you actually start to know yourself more, and as you pursue knowing yourself more, you will start to understand who God is. Like we are intrinsically linked with God because I believe that His breath of life is in us, and we said we're made in His image, and His breath is in us.
So no longer, sort of almost the opposite of what I was expecting to happen, to go find this God that's clothed in thick darkness and lightning goes out before him and mountains melt. Rather than going and find him, it was actually more of a situation of stopping and resting and me essentially just being quiet enough to see him and hear him, and that made a huge amount of difference for me to be able to actually connect with him on an emotional level. Like, it was an emotional experience, but I also felt, like I knew it was a relational experience as well. And it was just a very calming experience. I think that was probably one of the biggest things, is like, it's okay. You don't need to worry.
So you were expecting this, big lightning, and like everything, and actually it was a sense of calm and peace that descended, which is definitely what I've experienced too.
Which I really struggled with in one sense, because of course, like I said, I don't want a Christian experience, a false religious or whatever experience, and I use the word religion separate to, as most Christians do, use it separate to the actual relationship with Jesus, as it were. The religion bit is the rules, the sort of the constructs around who Jesus is,
and about how we relate to God.
So I felt I needed to have this like non-coincidental. I don't want to live in this world where I'm kind of explaining things that maybe, I'm struggling to make them think, so I'll just call them a miracle, and it's like, and I'll just ignore the fact that actually could have just happened naturally. And this was one of those scenarios. It's like, okay, he's totally superseded. So I said earlier, like, God can do coincidence, but he can do the other as well, which is this quiet, almost invasion of the just the problems that I have in my heart. I think that's the biggest thing, is like being aware of who I am more, and the challenges that I face, and some things I've created, some things have been done to me, and actually I've ended up with this person here, which is
who might not be the truest representation of who
the truest
you
representation,
are.
right? Is, I'm not a mess. Do you know what I mean? I've had say that like I'm trying to convince someone. I'm not a mess. I'm not a mess. But broadly, I'm a fairly average person. I'm like, I have a pretty decent life. I've got a fairly decent handle on most things. I had a fairly easy time emotionally. Do you know what I mean? I had a bit of depression when I was in my early 20s, but nothing that some people have to go through. So I've had all these things where it's like, it's going all right, but actually I can use that, I think, as an excuse to think, I can be settled in this place, like, because I've essentially got a bit of a handle on existing. And I think since that time, it's been a process of essentially not having a handle on existing, and actually it disintegrating to a point where, not like it was when I was questioning whether God existed. That was a disintegrating of the sort of ideologies, the ideas, the sort of theologies, the concepts that were dressed up as relationship with God.
Yeah, totally.
They disintegrated, and that's how I got there in the first place. This was more of a disintegration of sort of who I knew God to be, and actually him being like, no, don't pursue who you think you need me to be.
That's really interesting.
Just be open to me, and that's all we're listening for me. And I'm just listening to who is he.
So that moment where you were, felt like you encountered him really for the first time, it was that process of just releasing your ideas of who you thought God was, or who you thought he had to be.
Had to be, needed to be, right? Had to be in terms of what other religious people say he has to be. I need him to be in terms of, like, literally who I need him to be. Let go of all of that.
And just listen.
And just
let
listen.
him be who he is.
Rest.
Let him speak as he
Take
speaks.
my feet off the riverbed. Stop striving against the flow of the stream of the water to be in control, and just be open for a few minutes. And so I started doing that every day. It got to the point after lunch every day, and still do it now. And most days, I'm just in tears, not because I'm upset or crushed or anything like that. Although
you're coming alive.
Just because it's like peace,
peace.
Peace of knowing him, and I think this isn't, and none of this is to deny that God can and will do powerful and obvious things in the world, but for some reason he doesn't do it constantly. And I think my desire is to know him above all else. Not him as a miraculous worker in the earth. He already did the miracle through Jesus. The rest of it is window dressing in a way. So I want to know him above all. And I think that's the process that I'm going through now.
Yeah, so as you can tell, that's been quite a fascinating journey for all of us. I think it would be worth talking on future episodes about how, I suppose what your relationship with God looks like now. You've kind of alluded to it, that actually your daily practices and the way you relate to God, on a moment by moment basis is totally changed. You hit your views of him, how you operate in the world. So I think we'll have to talk about that in future episodes. But I hope that's been helpful to hear Matt's story, on top of my story as well. This has been an epic journey for both of us, and I think it's been crushing and scary, but absolutely thrilling and eye-opening and scary at times, because you're like, I didn't even know where this is going. Do you know, where suddenly all your ideas about who you thought God was and you were and everything's deconstructing, but actually revealing something far more beautiful and stable and
actually deeper.
And deeper.
Just think of reading the scriptures and now actually being excited because now I understand it more now.
Yeah.
And people think, that means a specific thing. Oh, you went to seminary or Bible school or something like that. And it's like, no. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually understanding the communication, the relationship, that of God. And we need to go into that so many different ways and angles.
I just feel like I've got so much that I just want to share with you guys, from both of our sides of the story. And when I'm trying to make these videos and make these podcast episodes, and Matt, I'm saying to Matt, I don't know what to say first. I've literally just got so... And you said, I think you're one of the few people in the world that struggles to start a video because you don't know, you've got too much to say.
You've got too many bits.
Yeah.
I sit there and I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm going blank.
We are on fire with this now. This is so exciting, because we've actually encountered God, not a religious idea, but God. And it's thrilling. So I hope that's been helpful. If you've got any questions, let us know. Anything you'd like us to discuss, any parts of the story that connect with you that you're just like, oh, that is me. Can you talk more about that? Because I really need to connect with those ideas, or I need some ideas of how to move forward from here. Or so I hope that's been helpful, and we will see you again soon. We hope this episode has encouraged you on your journey into freedom and peace. For more support and free resources, head to www.businessofblessing.com, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify and iTunes so you won't miss a single episode.